We've got ones that can see. Welcome, everybody, to today's show. If you haven't heard, there's a new theory going around about a fifth plane involved on the 11th day of September. That's right, a fifth plane. And of course, this information is coming to us from a credible source, TMZ. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, right? So TMZ, these are the mainstream media publications that just constantly talk about celebrities, get people addicted to celebrities, obsessed with celebrities, following celebrities around, paparazzi type of nonsense, which are the same people who condemn conspiracy theorists. Of course, are producing their own conspiracy theory. And it's not a surprise that this comes from Harvey Levin, because we're at a time period where Harvey Levin and his specific tribe, the Synagogue of Satan, need to make sure that nobody wakes up to, well, who was really responsible and what really occurred on that 11th day of September. So TMZ has put this propaganda out there about a fifth plane 25 years after the event actually occurs. There's information out there, and I'm going to show it to you. I took clips from this small documentary that they produced where they're trying to convince everybody out there that if the plane wasn't grounded, that plane was headed towards LAX, could have been heading towards the White House. I mean, some of the stuff in the clip you'll see is completely laughable. And of course, Harvey Levin, for those of you that don't know, was most known for, before TMZ, being an anchor on the People's Court. So this is a very credible source, of course. And they posted this on their Twitter account in our investigation of a would-be fifth plane on those attacks. We connect the dots to make up a terrifying picture. Here's Harvey letting you know that they've got this whole thing solved.
You think you know everything about 9/11? You don't. There was a fifth plane. We have the evidence. The government tried to bury it, but you can see it on YouTube. It's called TMZ Investigates 9/11, the fifth plane. Prepare to be shocked.
Of course, Harvey, we believe you. Don't mention anything about those dancing Synagogue of Satan members on top of that rooftop who were so excited when everything occurred. Anybody out there at this point, if they don't know who's responsible for the actual attacks and what actually occurred, which was a controlled demolition, then you really aren't awake to anything. And we know that there was lots of stories out there where these celebrities conveniently got off these planes. So we know that there's some people who don't believe that there are actually planes involved, that they were holograms. That's a debate that can go back and forth. Everybody knows that aluminum cannot go through steel and cause what actually was caused on that day. But we do know a lot of the suspicious stories like Mark Wahlberg, Seth MacFarlane, even Michael Jackson, Rob Lowe, celebrities who were claimed or had claimed that they were supposed to be on board those flights, who conveniently never actually boarded the flight. We know of the people who were in those towers who were notified ahead of time to leave those towers or not come to work that day. Of course, that was only if you were a member of the Synagogue of Satan, you were notified of it. But of course, there's a lot of stuff out there where they always want you to think about these planes and how these celebrities just conveniently never boarded the plane. They were either hungover or divine intervention occurred. And that's to create an illusion in your mind that the planes were actually responsible for what occurred. And then you get, before I play the clip for you, the alt-right media. You get the Benny Johnsons of the world. Bombshell. New report reveals fifth plane on the 11th day of September, covered up by FBI. Shocking truth uncovered. So it's amazing that these people are allowed to discuss, of course, false narratives that are considered conspiracy theories, which are government-fed conspiracy theories, because they still want you to think that planes were involved. They certainly don't want you to think that this group of people who is very much under attack right now, and there's actually Democrats and liberals who are waking up because of this whole Palestine controversy that's been going on college campuses, to who's really responsible for a lot of the things going on in the world. Well, of course, the alt-right media needs to feed you more of the fifth plane narrative that Al-Qaeda was involved and Osama bin Laden was involved. You get other people like Don Lucre. I mean, these are all alt-right puppets who pump out government propaganda and keep you stuck in the left-right paradigm. So I'm going to play for you the clip. Okay, I put this clip together as a 40-minute documentary so you can watch the whole thing if you want to. I had to cut it up for copyright purposes. But pretty much the narrative here is comical, that there were four people who were on board the plane. One of them didn't want to eat fruit before the flight took off, so they were real suspicious that they were probably going to blow the plane up. Somebody else wanted to get into the cockpit of the plane, and this goes on and on and on. Of course, the woman, as you'll see, who is talking is holding up the triangle of power while giving this fake information about how supposedly this plane existed and the government didn't want you to know about it. Take a look at this, produced, of course, by TMZ, a real credible source.
I definitely think that Flight 23 from JFK to LAX was the fifth plane.
I was flying a 767 on September 11th, originating at Kennedy Airport in New York, and destination was Los Angeles. The takeoff time was 9 o'clock. Everybody was in a good mood. Everybody was happy. It was going to be a fun day.
I was a flight attendant on Flight 23 on September 11th. Our crew was all ready to go. There were 7 of us.
I had 4 people board the aircraft in first class. I knew that the people did not eat meat. Deal of time trying to get these 4 people fruit plates.
The plane was not full. Relatively few people in business and economy, and only 4 people in first.
It was a taller, well-built gentleman, a woman in a hijab, a gentleman that appeared to be a type of bodyguard.
There was a woman wearing a burqa. I figured it was a woman because that's who wears that.
I was absolutely convinced it was a man. Absolutely.
It was a man, and I could tell by the size of his hands. It was definitely a male underneath that burqa. And I looked around and I saw a gentleman sitting, just sweating profusely. It was odd because it was 8 o'clock in the morning.
This was all happening sometime after 8:30 a.m. The flight attendants on United 23 saw things that seemed innocent enough then.
The gentleman in the tan suit, he asked the purser that he show his young son cockpit.
And then there was a child with one of the men, and they were just looking into the cockpit. The people that were in first class, they wanted to take off. They didn't want to eat. Our purser was determined that they get food because we had an extra long flight. They were arguing with her that they didn't want to eat. We do not want to eat. We don't need food. We want to take off. We don't need food. We just want to go.
First inkling I had of anything being different, the gentleman who was going to push the airplane back said, "Hey, did you guys hear anything about a fire in the World Trade Center?" No, we have no way of hearing anything about it. And we started our flight. Somebody made a radio call saying, no, there was actually an airliner that flew into one of the World Trade Centers. We did another PA announcement to the passengers that there would be an extensive delay. When we started getting a sense that something was seriously wrong and that somebody might be making a threat against the airplane, we used our suitcases and wedged them between the door into the cockpit. Anybody can get in the cockpit from that point out. It'd be literally to break the door down. One is a fire extinguisher, which I gave to Carol, and I said, if somebody does break through that door, hit him in the face with it. Also have a crash axe for ripping out panels in case of a fire. I was going to take care of anybody that made it through the door. It was my first flight attendant called me, on our intercom and said, I don't know what's going on, but I just want to let you know we have 4 guys sitting in first class, and it just seems a little strange. Kennedy Ground Control came on and said, ladies and gentlemen, the airport is officially closed, and we've been ordered to evacuate this facility. You are on your own. I guess we're going back to our terminal. And it was disbelief.
We eventually got back to the gate. We told the passengers that the airport was being evacuated.
They opened the door to let everybody out.
We moved the bags out of the way, and there was a little peephole. I looked through, and the airplane was completely empty.
As we deplaned, we made sure lavatories were clear.
So the plane was empty and locked, and that's what made an observation from below extremely suspicious.
Baggage people or somebody that worked on the ground there. People running in the aircraft.
By this time, the United 23 crew was connecting dots. The person in first class disguised as a woman. Passengers who argued with the flight attendant about taking off quickly without food. The person profusely perspiring in business. The request to enter the cockpit. The 2 mysterious people who were seen in the cabin after the plane was fully empty. There were a lot of dots.
We ended up getting interviewed by the FBI that I felt there were some suspicious people on the airplane. I did tell them that.
The first thing they asked me was why the floor hatches were open on the airplane. I know that hatch led down to the electronics.
They found that the hatch that goes down into the area where all the equipment is.
I was talking to the FBI and they told me those floor hatches were open. I couldn't breathe unless there was somebody down in the electronics area, and they opened it after we left the aircraft.
Maybe somebody was trying to get on the airplane without being noticed. Was evidence on the airplane they wanted to get rid of, whether it be box cutters in the seats or knives or weapons, I have no idea, and removed whatever evidence they wanted to and then simply left the airplane.
So every one of those people is likely an actor. The story about how they got off the plane after the fact and then they saw people on board, well, could it have been mechanics on board the plane? They want you to think that the people on board the plane were hiding underneath the plane, but that doesn't really fit in with the whole narrative of hijacking a plane. And what would they be doing underneath the plane and covering up evidence on the plane? Oh, yeah, they were on the plane taking evidence off of the plane, right? This is just complete fabrication coming out at a time where more and more people are growing suspicious of the synagogue of Satan. And they certainly don't want the American people to realize about those people dancing on the rooftops during that time period who are really responsible for it. And they certainly, again, like I said earlier, if you're not, if you really think that planes were responsible and went through the building and caused them to implode, and you don't think about Building 7 or anything else, then you're really way, way behind in your awakening process, because even the sleepiest eyes should be able to see that that was a controlled demolition. You got to love the woman in the clip, by the way, who is doing the triangle of power, right? I mean, even when people try to say about the triangle of power, like their hands are down in between their knees, Donald Trump often is like hunched over and does it with his hands on his knees. I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen one more obvious than this. She's literally holding up her hands above her stomach, above her waist, almost up at her chest to reveal the triangle of power while she's telling you this entire story. Right? There was a man sweating. Oh my gosh, he must have been somebody who was going to blow up the plane. There was a man dressed in wearing a veil over his face, pretending to be a woman. And can you believe those people didn't want to eat before the flight took off? I'm sorry, I didn't even know that was an option. Did anybody out there know that you got fed your meal before the flight took off? I mean, sure, maybe in first class they give you some peanuts, maybe, and some, a cocktail before the flight takes off. But apparently it's really suspicious if somebody doesn't want to eat before the plane takes off. You know, that garbage airplane food, that fruit that's probably been sitting there for weeks on end in a freezer somewhere. Wow, yeah, somebody refused to have the food, so that makes them suspicious as well. The entire thing is obviously a fabrication to bring attention from Harvey Levin and TMZ, probably the lowest form of scum media out there. I mean, what's lower than TMZ? What is less credible than TMZ? Is there anything less credible? Maybe Benny Johnson in the alt-right media, Ben Shapiro, but TMZ is like as low as it gets. They literally just walk around telling you about celebrities and who they're dating and what makeup they wear. They keep people obviously stuck in this idol worship syndrome that they have instead of waking up to the horrors of the real world. And of course, Harvey Levin's a member of the tribe. And Harvey Levin has to come out of nowhere. TMZ, who has never done anything about any of these types of events, suddenly is covering this story about a fifth plane and how they uncovered all of this truth. Now, all of a sudden, they're investigative journalists, right? Usually they're investigating, what color poop Brad Pitt had after eating a taco on a Wednesday night. They like to go into the bathroom and take pictures, say, Brad Pitt was in here, use the urinal. They take photos and stuff. And that's what the show is pretty much entirely about, the TMZ product that they put out there. Or stalking celebrities in airports. Now, all of a sudden, instead of they're investigators into this event and they're, the government's hiding something from you. Yeah, the government's hiding a lot more than that from you because your government isn't really even your government. Your government pretty much is an asset of Mossad. Everybody out there already knows that who is awake. But it's funny that the alt-right media is even feeding this to their followers. I mean, if you're that dumbed down and you actually believe these things, you actually believe that this wasn't a controlled demolition, you actually believe that Osama bin Laden, who was found dead days earlier, who people like Bill Cooper, of course, revealed months in advance that that event was going to occur and it was going to be pinned on Osama bin Laden. And of course, Bill Cooper was killed by federal agents because he didn't pay his taxes, supposedly. They came armed after him after the fact, right? I mean, if you actually think that the narrative that's out there about Osama bin Laden in a cave and it took them so long to actually find him, I mean, it's absolutely comical. If anybody is at that frame of mindset or that mindset of thinking at this point, 25 years after the fact, it's one of the things that woke most people up to what was really responsible, going on in the world and who was really responsible for what was going on. And though I even remember a time period where Alex Jones was talking about who was really responsible in 2001 for this. And of course, he won't mention that. Now he's one of the people who will jump on the fifth plane narrative likely because he works and is funded by those people now. They probably went, threatened him or cloned him or did something else, which we don't need to get into. But he at one point in time was even mentioning the real people responsible. Now you don't really hear many people talk about it because you're not allowed to talk about it. But there was people dancing on a rooftop who were celebrating the event. And of course, we know all the people who conveniently were called ahead of time not to show up to work that day, what altar they actually worshiped at, which is, of course, the synagogue of Satan. I just wanted to cover this for everybody out there if you hadn't heard the story. It's just another government psyop that they're putting out there to keep people believing that those people who they told us were responsible. Oh, yeah, there's a government cover-up because they don't want you to know about certain details of this. But there's no mention of the real people responsible because there never is. And sooner than later, as we know with some of the bills they're trying to pass, you won't even be allowed to say those people's names without having the government show up at your front door. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you were able to actually connect the dots, if you know what I mean. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all well. God bless you and your families as always.